Some call me Steve, Dad, husband, or friend. Others might call me boss, coach, or mentor. Today you can call me the Leadership Hacker. Thanks for listening in, I really appreciate it. My job as the Leadership Hacker is to hack into the minds, experiences, habits and learning of great leaders, C-suite executives, authors and development experts so that I can assist you developing your understanding and awareness of leadership. I'm Steve Rush and I'm your host today. I'm the author of Leadership Cake, I'm a transformation consultant and leadership coach and can't wait to start sharing all things leadership with you. Raj De Datta is a special guest on today's show. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's the co-founder and CEO of Bloomreach, which is a leading software platform. He's now an author of the book The Digital Seeker, which is a guide for digital teams to build winning experiences. But before we get a chance to speak with Raj, it's the Leadership Hacker News. Have you ever tried to change anyone's behaviour at work? It can be extremely frustrating. So often with great intention, it provides the opposite results, ending in poor relationships, poor performance, and often causes the person to dig their heels in. Still, some approaches clearly work better than others. In a study completed by the Harvard Business Review, a data set of almost 3,000 direct reports of almost 600 leaders focused on managers' 49 sets of behaviours and assessed the leaders on their effectiveness at leading change, specifically the manager's ability to influence others and move in the direction the organisation wanted to go to. They then analysed those at the highest and the lowest ratings on their ability to lead change, then compared that with the other sets of behaviours. They found that some behaviours were less helpful in changing others, and also that two had little or no impact, therefore providing useful guidance on what not to do. Being nice. I'm sorry, but being nice suggests that you finished last in the game of change. It might be nice and easy if all it took to bring about change was to have a nice, warm, positive relationship with others. Unfortunately, this research suggests that that's just not the case. Giving others incessant requests, suggestions and advice. I refer to this as nagging, to be quite honest. Now for most recipients this is highly annoying and only serves to irritate them rather than change them. But it's also often the change that most project managers adopt in the first instance, and continue to do so despite their lack of success. But there were some indicators and some behaviours that did correlate with exceptional ability to drive change, and here are the top 4. Unsurprisingly, at the top of the list is inspiring others, and there are 2 common approaches that most of us default to when we try and motivate to change others' behaviour. Broadly, we could label them as push and pull. Some people intuitively push others, forcefully telling them what they need to change, providing frequent reminders and sometimes following steps and stages with a warning about consequences if they don't. But we noted earlier that push doesn't often work if it's certainly not executed well. The alternative approach, of course, is pull, and we can employ a variety of ways. And these include working with the individual to set aspirational goals, exploring alternative avenues to reach an objective, seeking out ideas, better methods, design thinking, creativity. And of course, this approach works best when you begin to identify with the other person and what they want to achieve, and making the link between the goals and the change that they need to see happen. Providing that clear goal sits at the top of the list too. If I was a farmer attempting to plough a straight furrow, I need to select a point in the distance and then constantly aim in that direction. Change initiatives work best when everyone's sight is fixed on the same goal. Therefore, the most productive discussions around any change being proposed start with that end in mind, and it serves that strategy well. Challenging standard approaches. Successful change often requires leaders to challenge a status quo or the standard approaches and find alternative ways of working. Leaders who excel at driving change will challenge even the rules that seem to be carved in stone. And what seems academically simple to say, courage is next on the list. And it is academically simple to say, but behaviourally it takes a lot of practice. Aristotle said, "You'll never do anything in this world without courage. It's the greatest quality of the mind next to honour." Indeed, every initiative that you begin as a leader starts with that first courageous act. Be that a new hire, a change in process, a new product that you decide to pursue, any changes to your team or your organisation. every speech. All of these require courage. The need for courage covers many realms. We sometimes hear people say, "Oh, I'm not comfortable doing that." Well, my observation is this. Great leaders get comfortable being uncomfortable, especially when their change efforts demand the willingness to live in discomfort for longer than usual. So for those of you that are regular listeners to this podcast, you'll know that I'm a many models kind of guy. I don't believe in following one set of principles or one set of rules, but what I do know is whichever model, whichever book you read, you'll find these traits of behaviours around leading change and leadership in pretty much most of them. That's been the Leadership Hacker News. Please get in touch with us if you have anything you want to promote through the stories that we share on the show. Special guest on today's show is Raj De Datta. He's the co-founder and CEO of Bloomreach. Bloomreach is a leading software platform that powers over 200 billion of digital commerce experiences, and that represents over 25% of retail e-commerce in the US and the UK. Raj is a multiple-time entrepreneur and now written the book, The Digital Seeker, a guide for digital teams to build winning experiences. Raj, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you here, Steve.
So tell us a little bit about your story and how you ended up with Bloomreach.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up actually in the Philippines and back and forth between the Philippines and India for most of my life, and came to the U.S. when I was 17. And went to college, and then, spent a number of years in Europe building my first entrepreneurial venture, starting at the age of 21. Came back to the U.S. for business school, and then moved out west in 2003 to California, and have been doing kind of startups and growth stage ventures really ever since. And somewhere around 2009 was when kind of the initial idea for Bloomreach came about, and we were off and running.
Awesome. So at 21, you set up your first business. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
It was a crazy story. I'd finished university. I had gone and worked on Wall Street for about a year and a half or so, and I was intending to go back to business school. Had accepted admission to do so, and then my boss's boss said, "Hey, you've got a summer in between finishing up with us and going back to school. Do you want to help us sort of with a business that we're getting off the ground, and it involves building high-speed internet in Europe?" And I said, "Great, that sounds like a fun way of spending a summer. I'll do that." And as I got into it, I got so passionate about working with him and another colleague that the three of us just decided to start that business together. They had families in New York, so I picked up. I had never been to Europe before, but I picked up, got on the flight, and first went to Paris and then London, and then decided, I didn't really want to go back to school at that point. I was just too passionate about the business we were looking to start, and was off and running. And so it was definitely a adventure. Learned a ton in that first entrepreneurial venture, but very much career shaping.
Did you notice that it was an entrepreneurial adventure that you were on at that time, or was it just one of those things that you look back on and think, "Oh yeah"?
I think at the time I just thought it was a ton of fun. The adrenaline was definitely pumping. It was a crazy period of time as well. Perhaps dating myself, but it was in the late 1990s, and there was a bit of an internet bubble and telecom bubble going on. And so it was just a crazy time. And I didn't really know any better either. I just found, I was doing every job. I was a product manager. I was a developer. I was negotiating financing. I was raising money. I was dealing with regulatory stuff. It was just a ton of fun, and much more fun than, kind of the previous work experience I had had, both on Wall Street, and I had also been an electrical engineer. And so it was just, I felt like it was a very fulsome experience that was challenging day and night. I worked 24/7, but I just loved it.
Yeah, and there's often those early career opportunities where you have to put on all of the various hats that you sometimes later rely on in a more mature entrepreneurial life, right?
I think so. I mean, I have a blog post out on LinkedIn that talks about why I believe early career people should either start or join, relatively small startups. And the logic is that provided you can afford it, the learning curve, for every year that you spend at one of those places is equal to 7 years that you might spend a big company. And therefore, you learn very quickly whether you love it or whether you don't. And I had a lot of friends and colleagues that I worked with in that adventure who later on went back to more traditional jobs because they just found it wasn't for them.
Right. Yeah.
And I took the opposite course. But either way, we both found out very quickly, much earlier in life than most.
Now, Bloomreach has been a massive success and it continues to grow. And when you start to think of the fact that you power a quarter of retail e-commerce across the US and UK, that is an enormous scale. Where are you going next?
Well, I think there's a long runway. If we look at the e-commerce market as a whole, it's about a $5 trillion market. And it's been growing consistently at 15% year over year. We're still in a world, believe it or not, where about 18% of retail sales happen on digital channels. So it's still really early in that adventure. So first and foremost, we're going to just ride the wave and ride the growth of e-commerce to make that happen. But it's really our belief that, kind of the first 20 years of e-commerce is about a 20-year-old industry at this point. And the first 20 years have really been about what I call standing up the store, just simply being able to transact online in the same way as you could transact at a physical store. But really the next 20 years are about standing out from the crowd, because now digital has become a very competitive place. Amazon is one click away. And so the question is, what are you as a brand going to do to distinguish yourself so that your shoppers and your customers stay with you and come to you and prefer you? And that's what Bloomreach is focused on doing, is all the many ways we can enable those brands to compete online for scarce attention.
Time passes really quick, but when you reflect back, 20 years for a whole industry to be created is no time at all, really, is it?
Indeed. If we think about how old retail is as an industry, well, it's actually dates back to the beginning of civilization, right? People were trading something. Probably, the first people on earth were trading something with each other. So relative to that, e-commerce is a very young industry in many ways. And indeed, like most technology trends, the level of acceleration of adoption gets faster and faster, just as, iPhones were adopted faster than televisions, and, certain social media platforms were adopted faster than iPhones. So everything just gets faster and quicker.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that we're all digital teams these days?
It is fair to say that, and if we're not, then we're definitely on the losing end of the digital battlefield. We're all digital teams. Digital is at the heart of every enterprise that's out there, every business that's out there. And in fact, I think one of the key differences, I'm sure we'll talk about the book that I wrote, The Digital Seeker, and one of the key sort of research outcomes of that is that, in the first age of digital adoption, people thought of digital as their marketing channel. You sort of had a business and you said, I sell shoes, and now I create a website to sell those shoes the same way I sell the shoes in my store. So digital was a marketing vehicle for my business. And what's true in 2021 is that view of digital it tends to be very narrow. Indeed, digital is at the heart of everything we do, and therefore at the heart of our teams.
Do you think there's still room for businesses that don't have a digital or an e-commerce representation these days?
I think it is extraordinarily challenging. I will never say never. There's always going to be, the incredible restaurant that everybody knows with word of mouth, that has the amazing chef that somebody's going to, that people are going to line up outside to get a reservation at, that perhaps doesn't need a digital presence because that's how well known they are. But we have to say at this point that that's very much the exception rather than the rule, and certainly wouldn't be the way forward if one were building a business.
Right. Yeah. So you have the book, The Digital Seeker. So what is the Digital Seeker?
Well, I think it starts with really trying to ask the question, why do the winners win and why do the losers lose? And it turns out that if you look across digital winners in category after category, that we're seeing a tremendous evolution in the nature of digital experiences. And I describe that evolution as the movement from the customer to the seeker. And so, to make it very real, if we think about what's happened in our own lives digitally, the internet was supposed to make our life easier. And indeed it has. There's a lot of things available online that we would otherwise have difficulty procuring. But really, places like Amazon have trained us to do a lot more work as consumers. So, we figure out what we're interested in buying. We ask our friends, we do the research, and then we just show up on Amazon and buy it. That isn't the way it used to work. We used to, go down to the trusted store and ask them and get some consultative advice, and they would do a lot of the work. So Amazon has democratized commerce, but that doesn't mean it's made it easier for consumers. And in many ways, the to-do list of all of us digitally is very, very long. We sit in front of our mobile devices or computers and have a long list of things to do. So, it's our view that the winners actually aren't just going to make customers' lives easier. They're going to go to the root of why somebody's buying the product in the first place and build the experience for that. And that's what I mean by saying build for the seeker, not the customer. Figure out what they're really seeking behind the purchase. If they're buying some plywood, they're clearly not seeking plywood. Maybe they're seeking the idea of building out a deck to entertain their friends. So maybe build the website, build the app for building out the deck, not selling plywood. And that really is the thrust of the digital seeker, is that all of us have something deeper we're looking for. Build for that.
It feels to me almost like you flipped content marketing on its head somewhat, because you're looking for a transaction, an event, knowing that actually that's part of a much bigger picture that you can then fulfill through that experience, right?
That's right. Exactly. And indeed, content is a huge part of it, right? If I was building an e-commerce experience for building a deck, I would need to have videos and links to contractors and maybe virtual reality or augmented reality to place the wood in my own surroundings. There's a lot of things I would build that would go beyond, here's some plywood, check out, here's the price, transact. And indeed, it turns out that is a much richer experience. It's what consumers want. And it's also the source of competitive advantage if you're an entrepreneur, because if you just put some plywood, then the consumer just says, well, where's the cheapest plywood? I'm just going to buy there. But if you build this distinguished experience, there's a good chance that you'll drive a level of loyalty that you won't otherwise.
So in your book, you call this out. I think you call it by saying putting the seeker at the center. And that's that real philosophy of, let's forget the transaction that's just occurred. What about the seeker and what's happening in other parts of their life and work?
That's right. And very often we've heard for 20 years or more the idea of customer centricity. And often what that means is that's code for reduce the friction for people to buy from us. And that's fine. I mean, indeed, I like it too if I have to go through 2 clicks rather than 5 clicks in order to buy something online. But that misses the boat a little bit on all the other work I did before I made those clicks in the first place. And that's very much what putting the seeker at the center means. It turns out to be everything from what products I build, how I build those products, how I construct my teams, what work they do, how I do research about their intentions, and then certainly how I scope out and build out the experiences that they have with me as a brand.
So if I was an entrepreneur or small business owner or a leader of an organization listening to this conversation now, and I start thinking about the notion of switching out my focus from my customers to my seekers, how do I start that off?
Well, I believe it starts with a lot of whys. So, what you're trying to do is you're trying to discover your seeker first. So to use, some examples from the book, there's an example of a business called Hotel Tonight. And Hotel Tonight, today owned by Airbnb, but was originally a business that was started because the idea was that, you could go to Priceline and you could go to Expedia and you could book travel really easily. But so often there's a certain percentage of travelers that are looking for serendipitous travel. They're literally looking for a hotel tonight, not rather than planning a vacation. So what the entrepreneur discovered was, you could go do that on Expedia or Priceline or any other one of these travel destinations, but it's not a great experience if that's my goal, because it doesn't give me all the experiences that I would look for in terms of serendipitous travel at that moment. And so what the entrepreneur did is ask a bunch of why questions. Why is this person looking to travel? Oh, it turns out there's a certain percentage of travelers that are looking to plan vacations and others that are looking to just book them immediately. And then by asking the why question behind the what, okay, why do they want to travel serendipitously? Much of that might be dating, much of that might be last minute business travel, whatever it might be. And then why are they looking to look for a hotel? Oh, well, they're looking for a hotel that has certain characteristics. So by asking deeper and deeper questions, you can really get to the heart of the seeker's intention and build these unique experiences. And then when you end up scoping out Hotel Tonight, you find, wow, it looks pretty different than Expedia and Priceline. And now it becomes a lot harder for Expedia and Priceline to compete with the Hotel Tonight experience, because it's built for something deeper. So it's all about asking the deeper and deeper questions behind why a customer is buying.
Completely different experiences, aren't they? Same proposition, same product, but different proposition, different experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can find leader after leader in industry after industry who has asked these deeper questions and built profoundly different experiences, which then enable them to compete long-term much better than simply, I've got the same thing for a lower price and a little bit more convenience.
So I'm intrigued to learn that when you have conversations with your clients and they already have a well-established set of products and solutions and services, how do you then start the journey from, I know you want to sell this stuff, but let's take a step back and look at how do we evolve that seeker intention?
Well, I think it's a great question. And, so many brands and our customers and others are a bit in a rat race. They can be chasing next quarter's earnings or market share, for e-commerce. What we find is that, the wake-up calls typically come from their competitors because, if they are not acting in this way, there is some entrepreneur in a garage somewhere, maybe a well-funded garage these days, looking to build a digital proposition in exactly this way. So very often the wake-up calls tend to come from external forces like that. And then you start to ask the question, well, look, if we don't alter our own thinking, then that doesn't change the market. The market is still going to adopt the better experience. And that tends to be the bit of the kick in the butt, to rethink this.
So in your book, you have a model that you use around helping some of this creativity flow, and you call it the 3A's model. And I just wondered if you could spin through and let us know how we might harness them.
Well, I think the observation is that, this isn't just about sort of business thinking. This has a lot to do with technology. And indeed, if you're a business that has aspirations to serve thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of customers, then you can't possibly construct a proposition manually for each of them that speaks to them, because you want that experience to be deeply personalized. And so that's where technology really comes in. And the 3A's are really about the three technology forces that are changing how we understand our seekers and ultimately build experiences to win them over. And those 3A's are, first, a collection of ambient devices. Now, these days, there's more sensors on a piece of clothing than there might be, in an industrial plant. And so, there's just a lot of ways our customers are speaking to us through mobile devices and sensory devices and ambient devices. And that's the first A, is listening to the ambience. The second is AI, which these days have been, very much democratized. And AI is there to make sense of all this data so that it can figure out, well, you're the person who's interested in, this type of apparel, and somebody else might be interested in a different kind of apparel. And if I'm an apparel retailer, I should construct differentiated experiences on that basis. The AI can help you figure that out. And then the third A is what we call APIs, which is a bit tech speak for, all right, if I want to go build a Hotel Tonight experience or an Uber-like experience, I can't possibly build everything required to do so. But it turns out there are services across the internet powered by APIs that I can harness to build these unique experiences. So really the 3A's are a bit of the technology trends that we can harness to make our life easier to build seeker-centric experiences.
And APIs, application program interfaces, are absolutely everywhere across the digital landscape these days, which does allow more collaboration and more effective use of technology. How's that played out for your organization?
Well, everything Bloomreach offers is a collection of APIs. So if we think about what Bloomreach offers, we're in the business of offering what we call a commerce experience cloud. And that means, if you're an e-commerce business, what do you need to build your experiences. You need smart marketing, you need content storage, you need a great search engine, you need to personalize that experience. Well, every one of those is an API from Bloomreach. So you can just plug into it and get that service and power your experience and not have to build it all yourself. And that paradigm is very much true in every aspect of so much of digital building block building. Indeed, as you say, APIs are all across the web, and they're really the Lego blocks that we can harness to build the skyscrapers we're envisioning for our businesses.
Yeah, love it. So how have you seen COVID-19 pandemic impact our digital lives as seekers?
I think the pandemic, in the book, we talk about how it's accelerated the R naught of digital. And we know R naught as the rate at which COVID-19 has spread, through the world, and it's been really fast. But the other acceleration has been the rate of digital adoption. We've seen in 1 year in 2020, a 5-year acceleration of e-commerce and digital adoption all happen in the same year. So it's profoundly accelerated everything about digital, whether that be an urgency. We're seeing new shoppers come online that never were before. We're seeing people spend more money digitally than they never were before. We're seeing new categories like grocery and autos, arrive online. So it's just been a tremendous accelerator for digital, and it's really caused organizations of all sizes to put digital at the center and then ask how they win, which then raises the question of the seeker.
And how do you see organizations taking advantage of digital in terms of not just their e-commerce experience, but their internal experiences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think internally we're seeing a profound, kind of revolution in how people work to begin with, right? So we at Bloomreach have moved to a completely work from anywhere culture, where, we believe that for a technology business, the scarce asset is great talent, and talent is found everywhere in the world. And so why should we be limited by where we have offices? And so that mindset, I think has itself been a pretty profound shift in how we work, and changes everything about the resources and the planning and the hiring and the collaboration and, the culture and all the questions that we previously built around physical spaces now have to be built around digital spaces. So it's changed everything about the interaction between people. And I think it's going to create a tremendous productivity boom economically, for the globe.
Yeah, I agree. I often see organizations who maybe 18 months ago might have been digitally aware are now really digitally enabled. And as a result of it, it's unlocking new ways of working and new learning along the way.
Indeed. It's really been a shift pretty dramatically in how businesses work. Now, I think, to be fair, we have to be careful about leaving behind the billions of people that do work that isn't digital. And we've seen that through the pandemic as well. All the people that kept us alive, the teachers, the healthcare workers, the food delivery people, and on and on and on, who may not have been in digital work, and we've found we need them more than ever. So it raises as many questions as it answers.
Coming back to mindset, I suspect a lot of that is mindset of I'm not in a digital world, whereas many of those carers and manufacturers are in a digital world, but may not have experienced it or felt that they were part of a digital community at that time.
That's right. Yeah, that's certainly the case. And I think we can do a lot. We have the technology and the desire, I think, to make lives, just as effective through digital for that group of workers in our economy as we do for many white collar jobs.
You've been in the digital e-commerce community for a number of years, and I'm just curious to find out, from an innovation perspective, how on earth can you keep tabs of future emerging trends when it's moving so fast?
It's incredibly challenging to do so, but I think the benefit of the place we sit is that because we work with 1,100 of the world's largest brands in the world, the data flowing in is very rich. So I try to invest in my own education. I try to invest in conversations with people that might be outside the ring of interaction, and just keep challenging myself. And I'm constantly amazed. And so it is a rich learning experience, but that's what keeps it fun.
It's also what unlocks your next journey, because it's the unknown unknowns where the future is, of course.
Indeed. That's certainly true.
So we're going to turn the tables a little now, hack into your leadership thinking and experiences, having led a number of different businesses over your career, Raj. And I'm keen to try and get them down to your top 3 leadership hacks, tips, or ideas. What would they be?
Yeah, I think the first one is, if I were sort of advising a first-time entrepreneur, it would start with believe in yourself, or don't start the business in the first place. Because all you have really as an entrepreneur is your own judgment and your own wit and your own work ethic. And so very often, we have these dark moments as entrepreneurs, and we struggle with how to deal with situations. And ultimately, the answer is in our gut, and we may as well trust it because it's ultimately what's going to either make us succeed or fail. So I believe in belief.
Right.
Let's start there. The second is to be deeply authentic in the business you start and the people you work with. I think there are, of course, the leadership books about how one should do things, but the most important thing is to be true to yourself and express that in every other way, because authenticity is what we all value, whether it's a customer or whether it's a employee or anywhere else. And then the third is to constantly pay attention to culture and values and how we build the business as much as whether the business succeeds, and lots to talk about in terms of how to achieve that. But those are the 3 things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, I love those 3. They're great hacks, and culture sits at the heart of everything, doesn't it? And will shift.
It certainly will. And, I think that the fundamental mistake that most organizations make is that they think that culture is a static thing, and they think that it's really about what the culture is, and that lots of people spend lots of time in meeting rooms defining the culture. And to tell the story of Bloomreach, I wrote the document around what our culture and values should represent before I started the business. Before I even knew what the proposition was.
Yeah.
But actually, I think the most important thing we did is to make it real in the everyday lives of every team member. And that means treating it as an operational priority, the same way I would treat sales as an operational priority, or product development, or anything else. I would say, all right, I've got this culture. Now, what am I practically going to do every day, every week, every quarter to advance my goals of meeting the aspiration of that culture? Because it's never done. And it always is a work in progress.
And I love the way you operationalize it as well, because many people that I coach and leaders that I coach, we often have the conversation around culture being this non-fiscal return, but actually there's a direct return on investment on culture, isn't there?
There totally is. And in a world in which so many businesses are reliant on high quality people, a culture, hiring the right people and putting them in the right culture is 80% of the game.
Absolutely. Next part of the show, Raj, we call it Hack to Attack. So typically this is where something in your work or your life hasn't worked out well at all. In fact, could have been quite catastrophic, but you've learned from it, and that learning experience now serves you well in your life or work. What would be your hack to attack?
In the story of Bloomreach, my own business has had lots of twists and turns in the road, and I would say several near-death experiences. And if I think back to where the business was, I had started it in 2009. We were somewhere around 2015, 2016. The business had been successful early on, but was definitely falling apart. And therefore, by 2015, 2016, 7 years in, it was on the verge of complete failure. The initial product was no longer working as effectively as it once did. And the newer efforts were very nascent. And in the meantime, we had hundreds of people in the business. So, it required a fundamental shift in mindset, in thinking, and just a dogged stubbornness to continue and press forward. And I remember the meeting I had with the team members in 2016, where I said, look, we're going to have to let go of some people, and that's going to be really painful. And let's face facts. It's not working. And I'm here because I want to be a fixed point in the ground. And I believe we're going to build this into the business we all aspire it to be. But we have a lot of open questions, and I'm not exactly sure how. And that authenticity and the culture we had built kept the team together. And 7 years later, it's turned out to be a much larger business than the original one that we built.
It's fantastic. It takes a lot of nerve, but most importantly, takes a lot of commitment to pivot away from something when it isn't working too.
It does, I think, and that's the quality about entrepreneurship that I think is perhaps less talked about is it's this really narrow Venn diagram between dreaminess and reality, ability to see reality and truth. Because without the dreams, there's no aspirations, there's no long-term goals, and you don't aim for the stars. But without the reality, you never get it on, you never start to build the rocket.
Yeah, in fact, most entrepreneurs who fail aren't grounded in reality at the same time.
That's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Awesome. Last part of the show, we get to give you a chance to do some time travel, bump into Raj at 21, and you get to give him some advice. What would those words of wisdom be?
Yeah, 21, I think I would say I had, all the optimism, all the drive to go do something big. And I think I would tell myself, go after it. Fortunately, I feel like I did go after it in many ways, but I might have said, go after it even bigger, go after it even earlier, go after it with even less regard to whether it will work out or not. The world is an incredible place, and our time is scarce. And so I would just say, get after it.
Love it. What sets you apart, Raj, is the fact that even though you've been uber successful and created some superb and successful businesses, you still have this ability to be restless and not satisfied, that there is something else out there that keeps you going. Where does that come from, do you think?
I think it probably comes from my parents more than anything else. My father is a really world-renowned agricultural scientist, and he was unrelenting in his pursuit of what he described as feeding the world. My mother was a very well-regarded, actress and dancer and a consistent learner. And she, after never having, completed high school at the time when I was born, now has a PhD and did most of that later in life. And we studied together in many ways. And so, both my parents have that restlessness, and I think it's a good word.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing it. So how can we connect our listeners to you? Maybe help them get a copy of the Digital Seeker and understand a bit more about Bloomreach.
Yeah, well, Bloomreach, we can go, you can go to bloomreach.com, BLOOMREACH, and you'll learn all about how we really drive business growth for e-commerce. And on the Digital Seeker, you can find it in any bookstore. You can go to Amazon and search for the Digital Seeker. You can go to Barnes & Noble or any other bookstore, and it's available online.
Brilliant. We'll put some links in our show notes as well, Raj, so that people can finish listening and head on over.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Raj, it's been great chatting. I'm delighted to see Bloomreach grow and continue to grow, and I'm also delighted you shared your lessons through the Digital Seeker. And thanks for being part of our community here on the Leadership Hacker podcast.
Absolutely, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Raj. I genuinely want to say a heartfelt thanks for taking time out of your day to listen in too. We do this in the service of helping others and spreading the word of leadership. Without you listening in, there would be no show. So please subscribe now if you haven't done so already. Share this podcast with your communities and network and help us develop a community and a tribe of leadership hackers. And finally, if you'd like me to work with your senior team, your leadership community, keynote an event, or you would like to sponsor an episode, please connect with us via our social media. And you can do that by following and liking our pages on Twitter and Facebook. Our handle there is @LeadershipHacker. Instagram, you can find us there at @the_leadership_hacker. And at YouTube, we're just Leadership Hacker. So that's me signing off. I'm Steve Rush, and I've been the Leadership Hacker.